It's pre-show go live time. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on today's live stream, or if you're watching the replay, the live stream replay. We'll actually start this in about 10 minutes. It's 11:50, top of the hour. We'll be getting things started. This is the pre-show where I kind of get my act together, or I try to. Let's get the chat room popped out so I can actually see what people are saying today. Let's put this over here. We'll put this over on the right side. That looks great. Hi, chat room. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. We've got, in the first hour, we've got all Q&A. I've got questions ready to go, and I'll show you how to answer those online. There's the one right in front of me that we will be doing. We'll also, this is A plus 220 1001 today, the Core 1 study group. And then on Thursday, because we're doing this on a Tuesday at noon Eastern time, on Thursday at noon Eastern time, we do the second one. We do the Core 2. And then next week on Wednesday is Network Plus. The week after, no, next week, are we consolidating this week? I don't even know my own schedule. So I believe if I look at my schedule, calendar, and next week, do we cram both in next week too? No, I think we just separate it out. So next week on the 10th is Network Plus. On the 17th is Security Plus. There you go. There's your schedule for November. I managed to get them all in before Thanksgiving here in the U.S. So that works pretty good. Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. Hello, Jacksonville, Florida, and Nigeria. Welcome. Today is Core 1. I really need a lower third, don't I? I will work on that so I have a lower third that says what we're doing here. Because right now on the pre-show, I'm kind of checking. This is my streamer up here. It's recording and streaming. My recording down here is going. See the Cylons going. They are recording and streaming. Laptop is set up and ready to go. Laptop probably won't be here at this time next month. The new laptop will be here. This one I have to use a USB-C, which technically I think is a Thunderbolt signal coming out of there for the video output that you see. The new one I can plug directly in via HDMI, which will be nice. Hello, Germany. Hello, New York City. New York City. Good to have you here. Kurt says, passed A plus, CompTIA A plus a couple weeks ago with my help. Thank you. You're welcome and congratulations. That's fantastic. That's always good when you can get both of those. There's two very big, very dense exams, and it's nice to get both of them done, isn't it? It's got to feel good. Now you can go get that job, get the better job. Hello, San Antonio, which is, if you're on ProfessorMesser.com right now, that's where my server is. I believe that's where it is. Maybe it's in the Dallas data center now that I'm thinking about it. Hello, Charlotte. Hello, Atlanta. Hello, Manchester. This is one where we do all questions in the first hour that I give to you, and you can answer them online. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. And then the second hour, I will take questions from the chat room. We will see, sort of reverse it. So I ask you questions to start with, and then you ask me questions. The after show where you're asking me questions is really open topics. There's no specific topic. It doesn't have to be about A plus. CompTIA, or even technology in general, although who knows how good that will be if that's the case. Fellow business grad looking to get into IT. Well, business management worked great for me getting into IT, so maybe business will work well for you too. Hello, Columbus, Ohio. We haven't even started, and Ronnie in the chat room with the super chat. Thank you for the $4.99 super chat. Ronnie says, past Network Plus, thanks to you. Appreciate all you do. I did the easy part. You did the hard part. You're the one that had to study for this and get things working. So glad that worked out for you. More than happy to be part of that process for you. So that's great. From Broward, Florida. Broward, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Cleveland. There's, I saw also that CompTIA released a new Pen Test Plus the other day. That happened this week. So they have a new version of that out. Still don't plan to do any Pen Test Plus stuff, but it was nice of you to mention it. No, not 5 minutes to go. 5-minute warning, everybody. 5 minutes. My calendar's a mess. Let's go back to the question. We don't need the calendar anymore, do we? That was the marketing calendar that showed today and Thursday, which is great. We were able to put those in. Notice we sort of moved everything up a week this month. It's because it's the holiday season. It's upon us. I don't know if you noticed this. It's November. So we've got Thanksgiving here in the United States at the end of the month. So I wanted to be ready for that. And we've got Christmas in December. The holidays are in December, sort of the last part of the month. There's all kinds of holidays thrown in there. So I'm trying to do all of the study groups earlier on in the month. So is there any advantage in taking the test online versus on-site? Oh, yes. The advantage is taking it on-site, is walking into a testing center and taking it. Much easier, much less of an issue, much less complicated, a lot less prep. You just walk in, take your exam, walk out. Taking the test online is it's if you plan for it and you have the right idea in your head that when problems happen, you will be able to take care of those problems. That's the issue, is that there's so many things that can go wrong, and some people are uncomfortable with having the camera and someone staring at you the whole time. Other folks completely happy with doing things at home. They understand that problems can happen. They know that they may have to open up a ticket later if they lose internet connectivity or power or whatever. So we'll see. I'll talk about release of any potential new A+ exams later on, but the short story there is you should probably not expect something until there's at least something happening there for probably, I would think, the February, March, April, probably it may even be Q2 before we see a new A+ certification, which means the current A+ probably going to be around for quite some time. So that's kind of where that comes from. If you'd like to adjust what you are seeing, this is being streamed from YouTube, so you can hit the cog wheel at the bottom and adjust what type of resolution you would like. So there you go. Sometimes they are stringent about what they will invalidate a test over, and there are very specific rules that you must follow when you are at home. The rules at home are different than the rules in a testing center. They want to have the same secure environment when you are at home as they have in a testing center, which means they have to put additional rules on top of this. So they don't. If you're studying at home, if you're taking the exam at home, you do this. Or you read, on startup, a laptop computer screen. And they'll tell you, stop talking, move your hand away from your face. You may not even realize you're doing it. So things like that, in order to maintain the sanctity, the confidentiality of the exam, they may insist on that. Technically, the proctor at that point could invalidate your exam and fail you. So that's weirdness. But there it is. They've been a little bit better. They're getting better at this. So I don't hear quite the horror stories that I used to hear. But it's working pretty good. Yeah, there's we got plenty of time for questions in the second hour. So feel free to get your questions ready, because we're about to go there. That's funny. In the chat room, had them give my buddy a warning over his smoke alarm because of potential external communication via the beeping. All right, first, there's two problems there. First, your buddy has a problem by allowing the smoke alarm to beep every 60 seconds. Have you ever been in those houses? Have you been on a call? How does that happen in someone's brain that they can allow that to happen? After the second beep, I'm already on a ladder. I'm replacing batteries. There's no way it would go longer than a minute and that gets replaced. I just can't even imagine somebody having it beep all day. It's like a slow drip. That would drive me crazy. So forget the fact that your buddy may have a problem. The second part of this is, yeah, they can, if there's a beeping or other noises in the background, they can absolutely invalidate that. That's part of the rules. No do monitors, different things too. Oh, it's top of the hour. Look at that. 12 o'clock happened so quick. Let's bring up my keynote. Let's get a green light. Yes, please access this. Green light. That's good. That looks great. This looks good. Let's do a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2021 Professor Messer 220-1001 Core 1 A+ study group. I need to shorten the title a little bit, but there's so much that we have to tell you about in that title that this is for the Core 1 A+ exam. It is the November 2021 version. Can you believe it's November already? In this first hour, I have plenty of questions for you that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And in a moment, I'll show you how you can participate if you are watching us live. I'll also talk about things you can do if you're watching this on the replay. You can still follow along. We've got also in the second hour is effectively open chat room. So whatever questions you have, we will be able to answer them in that chat room. You'll be able to put them in there, and we'll work from that angle as well. If you are here live, you can answer questions live by opening up a new browser window and visiting this URL, professormesser.com/QA. professormesser.com/QA. You'll see there's a question already waiting for you if you do that. Some of you have a mobile device. You would like to use your mobile app. So there, of course, is an app for this, as it should be. Go to your favorite app store and download the Socrative student app. There is a Socrative teacher app. Socrative is the service we use to do this Q&A. Don't get the teacher app. That's the one for me. The student app is the one for you. And if you use that app, it will ask you for a room name. That room name, Professor Messer, PROFESSORMESSER. And that will get you to what we call our rewind question. The rewind question is a question from last month. So just to see if you can get in and answer the question, see if things are working the way you would expect. This month's rewind question asks, on startup, a laptop computer screen remains blank and the system beeps 3 times. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be a malware infection, bad RAM, a keyboard not connected, incorrect voltage, or a hard drive failure? On startup, a laptop computer screen remains blank and the system beeps 3 times. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Is it a malware infection, bad RAM, keyboard not connected, an incorrect voltage, or hard drive failure? If you think you know the answer, please do not answer in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We instead will direct you over to this URL, professormesser.com/QA, where you can answer the question there and online. We will come back to this question in just a moment. Thanks for being here. We're able to do these study groups because you are here and are able to participate with us. It's be a very different study group if I asked the question and we got no answers back. So you are a critical piece of this. So thank you for being here. We've got other things happening sometime during the month. There's always things happening during the month. One of the things you can do is go to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram, and you will see our daily pop quiz question for the A+ exams. We also have YouTube videos, professormesser.com/YouTube. It is on this slide. Professormesser.com/YouTube is our YouTube channel. We would love to have you subscribe. We would love to have you hit that bell. There's so many things you'd be able to do with that. One of the things I also focus on when I'm putting these together is to give you new questions all the time. So all the questions you see on YouTube, on Twitter and Instagram, and in these live streams are all new questions. Another thing I'll mention, if you're studying for the Network Plus right now, you'll notice a lot of new videos coming out on YouTube. So subscribe to that channel, hit the bell. I put 5 new videos out yesterday, probably get another 5 out there today. We'll see how that goes. But that's a great way to keep track of what we are doing here. We've got plenty to go through, but sometime in this first hour, I will stop for a moment and I'll tell you how you can get an email from me that certifies that you must have been here to earn a webinar category continuing education unit credit, or CEU. So we're going to have this CEU available for you. As you're probably aware, you can collect 4 webinar category CEUs to help if you're someone who is collecting CEUs. So that would be something that might help you as well. Now let's talk about timing. Timing. This is a little bit of a challenge right now. As some of you have noticed, the certifications for A+, those videos were released on January the 15th of 2019. That would mean, in the best possible world, that the expected retirement date for the current A+ exams is July of 2022, because they usually will retire them about 3 years and 6 months after their release. So 3 years and 6 months is July 2022. Now, one of the things you'll notice, CompTIA hasn't said anything about any new exams coming out. CompTIA hasn't said anything about any retirement dates yet. And if you go back and look at the Security Plus that was released a year ago, the Network Plus that was released earlier this year, one of the things you notice is things have slipped a little bit. I wonder what's going on in the world that would cause things to slip a little bit in the calendar. Regardless, I think this probably will slip a little bit too. But let's go ahead and just say July 2022. It could be that this exam is still around about this time next year. So if the real takeaway from this, though, is if you are studying currently for the 221,001 and 221,002, keep studying for these exams. Do not wait for a new exam. Even if one gets released tomorrow, you're not going to be able to have any study materials for it, so it doesn't do you any good. Study for the materials that are available to you. Study for the time frame that you will be working towards, and a year is plenty of time for this. So one of the things that I always tell people is never wait to get certified. That certification is much more valuable in your pocket. So don't ever wait to get certified. Take the existing exam. Don't ever stop for anything else. There's also, for this exam, and I expect this will be the same for the new ones when they come out, it's 90 minutes. You have to take 2 exams. Both of them are 90 minutes long. On the 221,001, you have to score 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. The 1,002 is a 700. A little bit more points you'll have to get for that one. Today, we're going to talk specifically and have questions specifically from the 221,001. Those topics will cover mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware network troubleshooting. So we will go through probably at least one of each of those today, if not more. We'll step through them in just a moment. Also let you know that every video I make on this course is available for you to watch online for free. There's no registration. There's no paywall. You simply go to YouTube, you watch the videos. You come to my site, you watch the videos. That's what you can do. It's a great way to learn information without really providing anything on your side. But I realize a number of you would like some additional study materials. Maybe you would like offline versions of these videos. And these are incredibly popular. My Success Bundle provides all my videos in downloadable form, MP3 audio versions of every video, my course notes, my practice exams, my exam hacks ebook. You get exclusive Q&A access to this live stream. There's plenty in the Success Bundle. You can find out more about these at professormesser.com/1001success. We also have questions for you. My Take 10 Challenge is out here. We've got questions that come directly and are archived from these study groups. So hundreds of questions available out there. I've also started adding performance-based questions to the 221,001 section. I hope to add some others here in just a bit. We've got plenty to see at professormesser.com/take10. So if you're trying to remember your all of your port numbers, I have a great port number drag and drop that's there. It's under the 221,001 section under professormesser.com/take10. Of course, all of these videos are available to watch immediately after the live stream on YouTube. I also make an audio-only replay version of this that I distribute in a podcast form. So you can always go professormesser.com/podcast, and that might help you. You can find also my Network Plus and Security Plus podcasts there as well. There's also video-based replays. They'll be available immediately after this live stream. There are also timestamps on here. My marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. Everybody say hi to Lori. She has to watch these so that she can put the timestamps in this entire 2-hour plus live stream. And they're great. You can go back years and know exactly where the questions and answers happen to be. I'll also let you know that when we aren't here live, you can always join us on Discord. Plenty to chat about with everybody on Discord. Go to professormesser.com/Discord, or you can click the icon on the upper right of my website where all those little social media icons are. The Discord icon is up there as well. Now, if you're planning to take your exam, I'll remind everybody that you can purchase your exam for full price directly from CompTIA, but why not save a little money? Come to the Professor Messer website where I already have discounted vouchers where you don't have to have a discount code. You don't have to hunt around for a coupon. You don't have to use one of those weird online plugins for your browser. They're just already discounted. So go to professormesser.com/voucher and you can get a voucher for any of your CompTIA exams, and the discount is already built into this. I'll even take it a step further, that if you buy the voucher from my site, I will give you my Exam Hacks ebook for free. This is a ebook that has a set of 14 exam hacks that may be able to help you get some extra points. It will help you during the study process. I give you tips to use during the exam, and I even give you tips afterwards if you have to end up taking this exam again. So things you can do there, already available. Unfortunately, these vouchers only available for U.S., Canada, and U.S. territories. I'm so sorry, those of you elsewhere. I know many of you are in the chat room from other parts of the world, and these vouchers currently only available for U.S., Canada, and U.S. territories. I'm hoping to find a way to make it easier and something that is going to be available. But at least this gets the folks in North America there. Let's do some questions now for the one we just went through, which was a question that I asked on startup. A laptop computer screen remains blank and the system beeps 3 times. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be a malware infection, bad RAM, keyboard not connected, incorrect voltage, or a hard drive failure? And you can see that 74% of you say that's bad RAM. So a pretty solid number there. 20% though said hard drive failure, your hard drive's busted, you got a problem. 4% incorrect voltage, 2% keyboard not connected, and 1% said malware infection. So the real key when you start looking at these problems, the computer screen remaining blank on startup, that's during the power on self-test or the post. The power on self-test will perform a summary check of your hardware just to make sure the hardware is plugged in, just to make sure it's installed. Very simple process. So it checks your RAM, it checks your video card, it checks your keyboard, it checks your CPU, and if everything is there, then it works properly. The problem is if something fails during that diagnostic check. And if something fails, it needs to give you feedback. If your keyboard was not connected, there would be a message on the screen that says your keyboard is not connected. If your hard drive fails, you get a message on your screen that says can't read from your hard drive failure, operating system not found, or something similar to that. But you can see that in both of those cases, you're getting a message on the screen because you can. If your video card was out, if your video display adapter was not working properly, you would just get beeping noises. You obviously wouldn't see anything on the screen because it's your video card that's the problem. See where that issue comes from when you boot this up? If you can't see it, then you can't understand what the error might be. But instead, there are a series of beep codes that will explain to you what this particular problem happens to be. And you can go back to the manual and see, oh, 3 beeps means my video card is busted. In this case, we did have a blank screen. The system beeps 3 times. And if you were to look at all of the different options here of things that would occur but keep the screen blank, bad RAM is the only one here that does that. If you have bad random access memory, then it can't put anything on the screen because it uses the RAM to be able to put that on the screen, and now you can see where the problem is. So there's your issue. Bad RAM is the correct answer here. Keyboard not connected would have a message on the screen. Hard drive failure would have a message on the screen. Incorrect voltage, your system wouldn't boot at all. You wouldn't get any beeping numbers there. And then a malware infection would not occur until you actually boot the operating system. The only possible answer here is bad RAM. If you answered B, got that one absolutely correct. Let's now shift gears a bit. One of the things I often do at the very beginning of our study groups, the first new question, is a performance-based question. For those of you that haven't taken this exam before, the first handful of questions you get on the exam are not multiple choice questions. The question we just did was multiple choice. There was a question and multiple choices of answers. But what if it's not multiple choice? It could be fill in the blank. It could be putting things in a certain order. It could be a drag and drop. It could be a matching question. They can ask you questions in many different ways. So I have for you a performance-based question. Let's see how you do with this one. This one's a relatively simple and straightforward question that simply asks, for these wireless standards, what frequency do they use? So for 802.11a, 802.11b, 802.11g, 802.11n, and 802.11ac, which one of those frequencies is in use? And if that particular standard uses both frequencies, choose both of them. So feel free to fill that in. I have it available at professormesser.com/QA, and that would be how you can answer these questions. So 802.11a, b, g, n, and ac, which, by the way, are the 5 standards you need to know for the 221,001 and the 221,002. Those frequencies, you have to choose either or for 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. Now, I realize, for those of you that like to be pedantic, not that I hear from you every day, but there are certain standards that have other frequencies outside the scope of these that are used in very unique situations. We're not talking about those. We're talking about the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz frequencies, which vast majority, you probably will never run into using any of these standards on something outside the scope of those 2 frequency bands. So have a look at that. I see that you're putting in answers already. I'm going to show them on my screen so I can see them. So folks are putting them in. And if you just want to put, if you think they're all 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, you can put A, 2.45, B, 2.45, G, 2. You can make it as simple as you'd like. You don't have to type in a lot of stuff for me. And a lot of you are doing that. So, and I like the answer somebody submitted, which was, I have no idea. I don't know. But that's good. If you don't know, you're about to know. So this will be a day where somebody says, what did you learn today? Well, I learned the frequencies in use for these different 802.11 wireless standards, of course, which actually is pretty useful. If you are in a situation where you need to design a wireless network, there may be reasons to use one of these or the other or both. So we'll talk about what some of those things might be. If you would like to do that in the after show, you're more welcome to bring that up. You can always answer these questions by visiting professormesser.com/QA and locking in your answer. Most everybody's doing pretty good on these. I'm going through and looking at this list. Some of these, though, interestingly enough, some that I thought everybody would be spot on with, not actually the case, which is really interesting to me. These standards are it's kind of crazy the way you have to memorize these. This would be a good one to put on my performance-based questions online, wouldn't it? I will do that this week so we can have those. In fact, some of the other 802.11 things, we should make more performance-based questions of those on the website too. Those would be really good. These are good memorization things that you need to know for the exam, and they are kind of rote memorization, but they really help whenever you're working through this. They really help you when you're designing a network, when you're troubleshooting a network. We'll figure out what these are. Let's see how you did with this one. We'll step through these one at a time to select the correct frequencies. We will start with 802.11a, and 802.11a is a 5 gigahertz technology. This was the one that kind of surprised me the most. Many of you chose 5 gigahertz, but a lot of answers for A came in at 2.4 gigahertz. 802.11a and 802.11b were released effectively at the same time. And it was interesting when these technologies first came out that we really did have a choice on which one to use. There wasn't one that was more popular than the other because they were both just out. And we had to decide what makes sense for what we're doing. And we ended up having a little bit of a schism in the industry because places like warehouses were using 802.11a and their 5 gigahertz frequencies to be able to communicate. But inside of our buildings, our offices, the 5 gigahertz was a little more expensive because it was the higher frequencies, and the chips available for that were a little bit more expensive. So more people tended to buy the 802.11b, which operates at 2.4 gigahertz in the standard. So even though these two standards came out basically at exactly the same time, you've now got choices on which frequencies to use. And it may be that in certain environments, like a warehouse, 5 gigahertz might be a little more efficient for you. So this was, there were some heretics. There's always heretics in IT. Always. We always can fight over, and just mention to somebody how great your fill-in-the-blank operating system is. And that's it. That's all you have to do to be able to make that happen. 802.11a is 5 gigahertz, 802.11b 2.4 gigahertz. 802.11g was effectively 2.4 gigahertz, effectively an upgrade for B. B really caught on. B was really the winner if you wanted to look at, even though 802.11a wasn't bad. In fact, it was 54 megabits per second, a faster technology, but it used 5 gigahertz for many different reasons. The 802.11b tended to be more common. I think it was cost was really the biggest reason. That's what it really almost always turns out to be. So the next standard that came out took 802.11b to 54 gigahertz, and we called it 802.11g. It's effectively what we did. So that G and A now had effectively the same maximum theoretical bandwidth available, which was 54 megabits. So that's great. So now we came to this point, though, where everybody's using these frequencies on 2.4 gigahertz. And if you look at the ranges, have you ever looked at the overlapping ranges for the 2.4 gigahertz? There's not a lot of bandwidth available. There's not a lot of spectrum available in 2.4 gigahertz for this. And you know that you've got kind of 3 non-overlapping channels that you could choose from. A 1, a 6, and an 11. It's what we call the channels. Those correlate back to specific frequencies in the 2.4 gigahertz range. That's not a lot. And if you are in an office building, you're in an apartment complex, and you have hundreds of people living around you, how are you all supposed to use 3 channels? That's not going to work so well. We need more channels. Well, the more channels is over in the 5 gigahertz range. So when we released 802.11n, that standard supports communication over both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. So now we can have more, because there's much more bandwidth available, much more spectrum available in the 5 gigahertz range, so that we can spread out a little bit and have a little more room amongst all of us. Plus, we could increase the amount of that bandwidth that we may be using individually, which would effectively also increase our throughput. So some great advantages with 802.11n, not to mention the MIMO that comes along with that. So we're already adding efficiency. Not only are we transmitting a lot, but we're transmitting in a way that's more efficient. And then finally, we introduced, I say finally, it's not really final because there's new stuff after this, 802.11ac. But for your exam, this is the last one you have to know. 802.11ac operates in the 5 gigahertz range exclusively. It does not operate in the 2.4 gigahertz range. And someone did put in the chat to me yesterday on Discord and said, but wait a second, that doesn't make sense. I purchased an 802.11ac access point, and I've got options in there to either be in the 2.4 gigahertz range or the 5 gigahertz range. So that's wrong. Except what they don't tell you, and what you may have to dig into the manual to see, is on your 802.11ac access point, if you enable 2.4 gigahertz, you're really operating as the 802.11n standard. Ta-da! So that's the secret. That's what they don't tell you, is it's backwards compatible. That's right. Except what really completely backwards. You are not running 802.11ac if you're operating in the 2.4 gigahertz range. 802.11ac requires you to use 5 gigahertz frequencies to get all of those great new features available in 802.11ac, including the increased speed, including multi-user MIMO, and a bunch of other great things there. So that is something to keep in mind. 5 gigahertz tends to have more range available to it. I do mind telling you the distances because there's no way to calculate a relative set of distances for wireless technologies, and you'll never be asked about distances either. The distance is going to vary based on the antenna that is on the sending device, the antenna that's on the receiving device, anything that might be in between. Are you outside or are you in an office building? How strong is the signal being transmitted on the sending device? How strong is the signal being transmitted on the receiving device? Do you see how this works? There's just too many variables to be able to calculate what a distance is. This isn't like copper cable, where you can say, we certify that this standard will only operate well up to 100 meters. We can only support this standard to 100 meters. Wireless is a different animal. You can't do that. So there are no standard distances. You don't need to know standard distances because it's pointless to know what those standard distances would be anyway. So that is your frequencies. 802.11a operates at 5 gigahertz. 802.11b operates at 2.4. 802.11g also operates at 2.4. 802.11n also operates at 2.4, but also operates at 5 gigahertz. That's the only one that's got a little combo to it. And then 802.11ac operates exclusively in the 5 gigahertz range. Hopefully, now that we've gone through those, now you know what the frequencies are. And those of you that answered earlier, I don't know what you're talking about, now you do. Now you know exactly what we're talking about. And those are the frequencies you need to know, along with speeds, along with functions, a lot of different things to worry through on your exam. Make sure you're familiar with those. If not, you can always go to my video on the 802.11 standards, where I go through each one of these over and over and over again. You just keep hitting replay and watching it over. I don't watch it over and over again, but maybe you will. And I think it's useful also to break out all of those other characteristics too. So I think I might make some other performance-based questions from that. Let's now shift gears back to multiple choice-based questions. Here's one for you that asks, a technician is configuring a mobile phone to send email messages. Which of the following settings should be updated? Should we update IMAP, SNMP, POP3, SMB, or SMTP? If you think you know the answer, please answer by visiting this URL, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. This is one you do need to know. The question again, a technician is configuring a mobile phone to send email messages. Which of the following settings should be updated? Is it IMAP, SNMP, POP3, SMB, and SMTP? All of those are important things to know. In fact, if you see those terms, you see those answers, and you don't know what one of those answers is, please make a note, because all of them come from your CompTIA exam objectives. You have to know what all of these do. But more importantly, you have to know how these are used. And this is the question. I'm not asking you what these abbreviations stand for. You'll never get a question like that on your exam, by the way. There's your tip, that if you're spending time trying to determine or remember what the letters in IMAP, SNMP, POP3, SMB, and SMTP stand for, you're not going to be asked a question about that. Now, knowing what those letters stand for might help you understand what the different functionalities are of that particular protocol, but you're not going to be asked. You'll never see a question in your exam that says, what do the letters IMAP stand for? Nope, you're not going to get any trivia questions on that. So nope, that's not going to happen for you. Make sure that that you know what these things are used for. That was the important fact. That's what this question asks, which is, a technician is configuring a mobile phone to send email messages. Which of the following settings should be updated? Is it IMAP, SNMP, POP3, SMB, or SMTP? There's a lot of S's. There's a lot of P's in here, intentionally. So I have to admit, I did intentionally put a lot of answers in here that look the same, intentionally, so that you will have to parse them out. And by the way, the exam does a similar thing, or else I wouldn't have mentioned it. Let's see how you did with this one. A technician is configuring a mobile phone to send email messages. Which of the following settings should be updated? Is it IMAP, SNMP, POP3, SMB, or SMTP? And you can see that 67% of you have chosen E, SMTP. 17% said POP3, 13% said IMAP, and then only 2% said SNMP, and only 1% said SMB. So let's go through this question and figure out what was happening here. Specifically, what you should have seen, which should have jumped out at you, is the question that was saying a technician configuring a mobile phone to send email messages. And if you're familiar with the process of sending an email message, then you know that that particular protocol, the particular methodology that we use to do this, uses the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. SMTP is a protocol that is also used to send mail between mail servers. So when you are sending mail, it's always using that SMTP to be able to send it. Receiving mail is a completely different animal. We don't use SMTP to receive mail. We only use it when we are sending mail. Could we make mail more complicated? No, we could not. Well, I guess we could. Wait till you get into Security Plus and dealing with certificates. That's another problem. These usually require some type of authentication, by the way. Can you imagine if we just allowed anyone to send any mail through any mail server? Well, in fact, you will find a number of mail servers out there that are open, and that's why you end up getting spam into your inbox. So that's one of those that's important. Port numbers commonly used with SMTP are TCP port 25 for the one that does not have authentication. If you are authenticating, and why aren't you? You should be using TCP 587. That is the standard and the most common one to use for these. Of course, your internet service provider could choose any port numbers they like, but these are the most common, the ones that are standardized that you will find for SMTP. So that's why in this question, it specifically says and asks, we're configuring the phone to send email. And so as many people in the chat room have already mentioned, that send mail to people. That's what SMTP stands for. It doesn't stand for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. That's not what it stands for. It means send mail to people. This is what you would use to be able to send messages from any device, not just a mobile phone, but from any of these devices using these protocols. What about these other answers, though? POP3 and IMAP were two popular answers at 17 and 13%. POP3, the Post Office Protocol version 3, and IMAP, both of those are protocols used for mail, but they are used to receive mail or manage your mail on your mailbox. They are not used to send mail. They're primarily used to receive. In fact, most people aren't even using POP3. If you're configuring someone who will be reading their mail, receiving their mail, almost always going to be using IMAP to do all of this. POP3 is just probably not even used by most people any longer. If you're using maybe a really old application or a really old device that doesn't know or doesn't care to use IMAP, because IMAP is a little more involved, it's a little more complex of a protocol, they will prefer using POP3 because POP3 is relatively simple. POP3 is, hey, can I have mail? Yes, here's your mail. It's a very simple thing. IMAP has a lot of additional capabilities. You can manage folders. It allows you to keep the mail in the mail server and only download the things to your local machine that have recently been updated. A lot of things happening. There are people still using POP3, though, because there are still applications and devices that's all they can do. They can't do any IMAP. And functionally, that's something important to know. So you do have to know both of those. SNMP, which sounds a lot like SMTP, is a completely different thing, the Simple Network Management Protocol. They're both simple. SMTP is the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. I don't know what this obsession was with being simple back in the day. There's nothing simple, by the way, about SMTP, and there's nothing simple about the Simple Network Management Protocol, but that's what we call them anyway. Obviously, SNMP not used at all for mail. It's used only for network management capabilities. And SMB, the server message block, that is the method that popularized by Microsoft. It's been around for quite some time, and other operating systems can use it. SMB primarily seen in the Windows operating system to be able to transfer files, to print, and to do things with the file systems. So that is why in this particular question, the only answer that makes any sense is answer E, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. 66% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another one. Let's keep this going. I've got another question, and this one asks, a network administrator is connecting devices to a network at a remote site. Which of the following technologies would most likely be in use? Would it be a switch, a repeater, PoE, hub, or proxy? A network administrator is connecting devices to the network at a remote site. Which of the following technologies would most likely be in use? Is it a switch, a repeater, PoE, hub, or proxy? If you think you know the answer, follow that link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. So you're at a remote site. They told you need to plug in some things. You're connecting some devices. What are you using? That's really the question. So let's see if you happen to know what you would use to connect all of this together. Is it switch, repeater, PoE, hub, or proxy? I do try to give you a bit of context on these questions because on the exam, you get a bit of context for those. So that's something to keep in mind as you work through all of these. This is a good question, I think, to understand what all of these are. So make sure that switch, repeater, PoE, hub, and proxy, make sure you're familiar with what all of those might be. I think whenever you are looking at technologies, especially technologies on the network, you need to know what all of these are. So be familiar with those. These are useful also, by the way. If you don't know what any of these are, or you don't know what one of them is, make a note so you know what it happens to be. All of these are from the exam objectives, so knowing what they are is going to be important. This is, by the way, a question that is in the Core 1 because there's a huge section of the Core 1. One of the major domains is all about networking. So having an understanding of where you would use these technologies is something that's going to help you also on the networking side. The question again asked, a network administrator is connecting devices to the network at a remote site. Which of the following technologies would most likely be in use? Is it switch, repeater, PoE, hub, or proxy? And you can see that 44% of you have chosen switch, 25% of you have chosen proxy, 14% of you have chosen hub. And then you can see 7% of you have chosen repeater and 8% chose PoE, effectively a two-way tie there in fourth place. So we're really trying to figure out proxy, hub, and switch. And 46% of you chose switch. So if we had to go with one of those, that would be what we would choose. Now, in this case, you're on a remote site. You got a bunch of devices. You want to be able to plug them in and connect them to the network. You would use a switch. It's a bridge, except it's a really fast bridge with tons of ports on the front of it. And most of this is done in hardware. So we don't call them bridges anymore. We call them switches. In fact, it's exactly the same thing. Bridge and a switch are literally exactly the same thing. But if you need to connect a device to the network, you're probably connecting to a switch. If you have Ethernet devices at work, they are plugging into a switch. If you have Ethernet devices at home, they are plugging into a switch. You may say, no, at home, I've got a home router. I've got a wireless router is what I use. Actually, there's multiple ports on the back. Those multiple ports are switch ports. So not only do you have a router at home, and not only is it wireless, it's also a switch as well. So who knew? They just don't call it a switch, but it absolutely is a switch. And there are even some switches like the one I just mentioned. You've got a wireless router at home that has switch ports in the back of it. That's a multi-layer switch. You could say you have a layer 3 switch, except as we all know, those don't exist. Layer 3 switches. Switching's done at layer 2. Routing's done at layer 3. So is it a layer 2 router or is it a layer 3 switch? We can ponder over that one and figure out what would be. But the answer to this particular question is indeed a switch. That's what we would use. So, of course, that's what it would be. The fact that you're at a remote site doesn't matter. You're probably using a switch at your main site as well. That's how that piece of it works. Now, we've got other options here. 25% of you chose proxy. Proxies are great to use for doing some type of security controls. I wouldn't say great to use, but they have been used in the past for security controls. They have been used in the past for caching. So there's some useful things there. to know about. But proxies do not connect a device to the network. That's not what a proxy does. A proxy is there to be an intermediary between you and another device that might be on the network. We've also got 13% of you said hub. And if this was 30 years ago, that would have been your correct answer, would be a hub, because that's all we had. Did we have switches 30 years ago? We may not have, or we were just coming out with them. But back in the day, we'll say 40 years ago, all we had was hubs, then the answer would have been hub. These days, if you look around your house, your office, there are no hubs. We don't have hubs anymore. They disappeared so fast. We could not throw them out fast enough. The only people that were still using hubs were network administrators who needed some way to tap into the network with their protocol analyzer. In fact, that's still a great way to tap into the network, just not on gig networks. But that is not the correct answer because they just don't exist any longer. So that would not be the right one to use either. We've replaced them all with switches. We've got repeaters. A repeater doesn't connect devices to the network. It extends an existing connection so that you can repeat the signal and make it go even further than it was traditionally or originally going to go. And then you've got PoE, Power over Ethernet, which is a great technology to have to power up devices, but PoE as a technology does not connect a device to the network. The only thing that connects a device to the network is a switch. So the question in the chat room, when would hub be a right answer? So if the question was, you've thrown out a device on your network and replaced it with a switch, what did you throw out? You threw out a hub. That's probably the only time you would see that, is for all of those. In the chat room, Lee with the 10-pound super chat. Thank you so much for your support. Lee says, pass the Network Plus on Sunday. Thank you, Professor Messer. Your course materials and study groups have been absolutely invaluable. Thank you so much. Keep up with these study groups, folks. They are incredibly useful. From the horse's mouth. There you go. Someone who just was able to make that happen. So that's where you would get the answers there. It is from someone who's already gone through this process. Congratulations on your Network Plus. That in itself is a great certification to have in your pocket. Hopefully that can help you as well. There are questions that will also come up on your exam. You might get a question about broadcast domains and switches and hubs and how they handle broadcast and collision domains. There could be some of that. There are certainly legitimate questions to ask, but because hubs are so old and not used any longer, there's probably not going to be huge emphasis on those. You don't have to know a lot about them. You can't even trip over them anymore. They're just not around. That's not where you would go to do to have any type of technology or product on the network. There's tons of questions to go through on these exams. You can see we've only gone through a few already, and there are tons of different technologies. One of the things I've found on the internet is that the questions you would find for free on the internet, some of them are just awful. Some of them are not even correct. They aren't even asking you questions of the same style that you would expect to see on the exam. And because there was just a lack of good quality Q&A, I decided to write my own. So I created Professor Messer's Core 1 A+ Practice Exams book. This is a book that has practice exams that I wrote with the same style and the same flavor, if you will, as the actual exam. So I tried to make them as difficult as the real exam with the same style of presentation as the actual exam, but they're all original questions. These are all questions that I have personally written every single one of these. So you know that they have some thought behind them. Let's hope that has some thought behind them, but it's also written from the perspective of someone who's already passed these certifications and knows the things you need to know. Let's do one right now. I've got the book up right here. Let's do this one. The question A16 asks, when a user, well, we just did this one. We're going to do this one anyway. No, we're going to do a different one. So we'll do A17. A firewall is configured to block email transfers from a remote server. Which of the following ports is the firewall blocking? We'll have to see if you remember. Is it 443, 22, 23, or 25? Got a few options to choose from there. Now, if you think you know the answer, you could jump right to the quick answers and look at what they might be. There's a link on here for the details because this is a PDF. I can simply click on this. It's a live link that takes me to page 50 where that question is, and it tells me the answer is D25. So that's one that I think can help you if you're in the middle of this. Let me click a few things away. This was definitely not one. As always, no answering in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We'll have to clean that up later, I guess. So it tells you not only what the answer is, but like a lot of other exams, it tells you why that's the right answer. And this is port 25 is used by SMTP to send mail from devices. Now, the thing that I always have a problem with on these questions is I get them wrong, and I never understand why I got it wrong. So on my book, every single incorrect answer has a description of why this is not the right answer, so that you can understand if you get it wrong, why you got it wrong. You'll learn something because getting it wrong is an opportunity for you to learn what the right answer is. What I also like of this is that even if you get the answer right, there's some good information in the wrong answers here. Make sure you read through all of them because the question you got on your exam might be about Telnet. It might be about Secure Shell. And I already put some of the information right here in the wrong answers. So very useful to be able to have that there. The last one on here is for every single question, I have a QR code and a link that takes you to the video where this question came from. So if you need a little bit more information, you will be able to pull that information right out of there. And since you're in a PDF, you can annotate this, you can write on it. I'm going to click the back button and go back to where we started, and I can just keep going through this book. These are my practice exams. You can go to professormesser.com/core1PE. That's Core 1 Practice Exam. And you can get this. It's a book that has 3 90-question exams inside of it, 370 pages. There's also a physical version. There's the physical version. This is the Core 2. I'm not trying to fool you, but the Core 1 looks exactly the same. It has a similar amount of pages to it. These are big, big books with plenty in them. And if you purchase the physical version, you get the digital version for free. You can download it immediately. Go to professormesser.com/core1PE to be able to do that. I know we didn't go through the question that talked about the beeping. And in the chat room, some folks are saying, how are we supposed to memorize beep codes? I don't know why you would memorize beep codes. Don't memorize beep codes. That'd be a huge waste of time. Beep codes are different between BIOS versions, between manufacturers. There are no standards for beep codes. And you won't be asked about what the beep codes mean. You'll never get a question that says, it beeped 3 times. What do 3 beeps mean? No, there's no question like that because there's no way to know. You go to the manual, like people are saying. You have to go to the manual to figure that out. It's not going to be on an exam. It may ask you, the screen was black and it beeped. What do these beeps mean? What is the purpose of having this beeping sound? So that's a completely legitimate question, but it's not going to ask you about the number of beeps. That's ridiculous. That's not even accurate or useful. Let's do another one. This is one that asks, which of the following would be the most important component in a virtualization workstation? Is it video resolution, HDMI interface, RAM, a BIOS version, or audio outputs? Which of the following would be the most important component in a virtualization workstation? Is it video resolution, HDMI interface, RAM, BIOS version, or audio outputs? Some folks in the chat room are saying Morse code. Interestingly enough, if you're someone who's worked with amateur radio equipment, they do have processes where it can send you Morse code to tell you what's going on because people who are amateur radio operators, many of them know Morse code. So if you're a CW aficionado and you can remember all of your CW, that's what the amateur radio operators call Morse code. CW stands for continuous wave. That's one that I think can help. I've been with amateur radio equipment. You turn it on and it sends out a series of Morse code to tell you the status of that device, kind of as a post. So maybe they should do that with our computers. Have it send more Morse code. Wouldn't that be great? Then we wouldn't have to go to a manual. It could just tell us what the problem was. whenever we started the machine. It goes beep, 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 beep. You know, oh, it's your keyboard's not connected. What? How'd you know that? Well, because I spent way too much time learning continuous wave. That's what that's for. Hopefully that will help you as well. See if you can put your final answer in. There's your link. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. I'm glad. Yeah, then we'd have to learn Morse code for our A+ exam. Maybe that's a bad idea. Forget I mentioned it. We have enough to memorize as it is, right? So we're good. We'll figure out the rest of this. Let's see if you knew what the answer to this question is, which asks, which of the following would be the most important component in a virtualization workstation? Is it video resolution, HDMI interface, RAM, BIOS version, or audio outputs? What's interesting about this is you need all of these on a workstation, but the question asks which would be the most important component. So that's the real interesting part of this particular question is you have to figure out which one is the most important. And 82% of you say RAM, 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 RAM. RAM is the most important. RAM is what you need to have in your system. RAM is the most important one to go through. That's the one you need to know. We have single digits for everything else. 8% for BIOS, interestingly enough. 8% for BIOS version. We'll have to have a conversation about that. 6%, that surprised me. 6% for video resolution, does not surprise me. 4% for HDMI interface, I'm with you. 0% for audio, good for you. Because I think that's how it did. I passed the 5 words per minute. I got better though. I could probably pass the 13. I don't know if I could do it today, but with a little bit of help. And I was getting to a point where I was close to 20, but I never got there. And as many of you who are amateur radio operators know, they allow the extras now they only need to do 5 words a minute, and I got my extra and I didn't worry about it anymore. It's my issue. Virtualization though, if you have a virtualization workstation, then you're running many operating systems at the same time on the same system. Now, if you've ever run Windows on your workstation and you thought, man, this Windows would be much faster if I just had more memory. Imagine running multiple versions of Windows at the same time. Yes, you're going to need more memory. Get as much memory as you can, enough random access memory. Fill it up. Get as much RAM on your system as you possibly can. Secondarily, maybe a lot of CPU cycles, especially if those operating systems that are running in virtual boxes, what if all of them are really, really busy? They're all going to need a piece of that time on your CPU. So lots of CPU to be able to do that. And so I didn't give you the option for CPU because I wanted you to pick out what the most important one would be. And then the online system that we use doesn't allow me easily to have you select multiple options and be able to monitor for that. So I wanted you to choose one that really would stand out, and you chose very well. 82% of you chose RAM. That is the right answer. That is the one we were looking for. For all of these, RAM is absolutely the most important component in a virtualization workstation for what was available there. So certainly they're something you can work through. 8% of you said a BIOS version. BIOS doesn't really have anything, at least the version of the BIOS generally has no effect on the applications you run on the system. Very rarely would your BIOS version require an upgrade to be able to perform a particular function. That is not usual or common to have that. So it's unusual. BIOS version came up as an 8% in second place because that's just not really how that works out. Interestingly, though, but not the right answer. BIOS version would need to be upgraded if there was some function or feature in the BIOS that was either added or a bug fix. Those are very, very unusual to see. It's very rare that you would need to even change the BIOS version on a system. So BIOS version would not be our right answer here. It's certainly not the most important component in a virtualization workstation. Video resolution is an important thing. You know, if you have a small video resolution, how hard it is to work. You can't see anything. You need a lot more room on the desktop. But for a virtualization workstation and the available options, RAM is much more important. Same thing with HDMI interface. May not even be required on a virtualization system. HDMI interface is not the right answer. We need RAM much more than we need HDMI. And then audio outputs, obviously nobody thought audio was important at all to have that there. That's where it would go. That might help you. This is where you would go for this. The most important component in a virtualization workstation, BIOS version. Yes, not the BIOS functionality, not turning on virtualization, hardware virtualization in your BIOS. We're talking about the version of BIOS, not configuration options. Maybe that is what led people down the road of BIOS. That could absolutely be the case. So in this particular instance, though, even that is not as important as having tons of RAM in your system. It's easy just to turn on a configuration setting. RAM is the most important. Now in the chat room, some folks saying, but between the two, when would CPU be an answer instead of RAM? You're not going to be asked that. I mean, those two are so important. You're not going to be asked in a virtualization workstation, which is more important, RAM or CPU? You can't really compare those two. They're used for different things, different times. What if every virtualization operating system you're loading up barely did anything? CPU wouldn't be important at all. Or wouldn't, not at all, but it would have a lower priority than RAM. What if on your systems, every single one of those was doing video rendering and the CPU was spiked on every single one of the VMs? All right, well, maybe CPU would be more important than RAM. So you're not going to be asked one of those types of questions. You'll never be asked a question on the exam where two answers are technically correct. And if you think they are, because people have told me, oh, I got a few questions on my exam where I could have, either one of them was right. Well, guess what? That wasn't actually the case. One of them was right. The other one was not right. That's what you would find on the exam. If you're watching these videos for continuing education unit credit, one of the ways that you can receive an email from me, or the way, contact us link on that page. Click that contact us link. In the form that shows up, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put November 2021 A+. That gets me. Last, I want you to put a month and have of the month. It's kind of pointless for what we're just not gonna. We're just there. Refresh your pages, everybody. We'll drop out this again. So if you're watching this unit, Professor Messer website, put in the, and let's see how things go with a different cache, a different data rate. Let's see how YouTube's doing now, everybody. So yeah, we're not going to move to Twitch. That's for sure. Let's see how that happens now. We'll get everybody back on, get your refresh, and let's see how things go. Refresh, everyone. So maybe YouTube will have figured it out here pretty much. We'll get there. We're definitely not moving to Twitch, though. For those of you that were checking in, definitely not heading to Twitch. We'll stick with YouTube. They've been pretty good for us. And they made it back, so good for them. We've got plenty more to go through here. As I was saying before we were so interrupted, if you would like to receive continuing education unit credit for this study group, we would love to have you send me an email. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, and in that Contact Us link, put the name, your name, put your email address, put your, in the subject line, put that this is the November 2021 A+ study group. The super secret code word of the month is BIOS version. BIOS version is the super secret code word of the month. That is what I'd like you to put in there, and put that in a line by itself. If you'd also like to put anything else, I read through all of these, you're more than welcome to put anything else in there as well. We've got plenty to have a look at. So the BIOS version is the super secret code word of the month. I usually send these out about once a week. So be looking for your email that certifies you receiving 1 hour of a CEU. Now, we got time for one more, though. I know we're sort of at the top of the hour, but we had to deal with a little bit of that YouTube outage. So let's do another question, everybody. This next question asks, since some of you were pretty big on cloud, so here we are. Here's a cloud question for you. It asks, a cloud-based application instance automatically increases resources during busy times and decreases during slower times. Which of the following would best describe this feature? Is that caching, load balancing, rapid elasticity, PAAS, or private cloud? Caching, load balancing, rapid elasticity, PAAS, or private cloud. That's what you need to choose from. See which one makes the most sense. The question again is, a cloud-based application instance automatically increases resources during busy times and decreases during slower times. Which of the following would best describe this feature? Is it caching, load balancing, rapid elasticity, PAAS, or private cloud? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link on your screen, and you can answer that question too. Lock it in. See what it happens to be. This is one where the cloud and cloud technologies, there's a whole section on the exam dedicated to the cloud. And interestingly, it's a relatively small section for number of exam objectives, but it's a relatively large percentage of the exam. So the ratio of percentage to exam to the number of objectives is very different than the rest of the exam. So there will probably be a lot of questions you get from a very small number of options. So the more you know about this, these may be gimmies for you on the exam if you go through this particular section. This may be easy for you to step through. So maybe that's what you'll find if we go through the details of this, that the cloud-based issues, the cloud-based Q&A exam objective section of this may be easier than you think for being able to get some good points on the exam. We'll have to see how that works out for you. Go ahead and lock in your answer. You can see the link is on the screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. This is plenty to go through. Well, cloud is going to be in your life going forward. There's no way around it. Every organization is in the cloud now to some degree. You will be asked to implement cloud-based technologies as part of your job, whether you work as workstation, server, network, security, doesn't matter. There's going to be some cloud-based technologies you need to be able to work with. And knowing that cloud is going to be pretty important for you. So we'll go through a few more of those questions. Also, great questions coming in the chat room, by the way. We'll do, in the after show, we'll do plenty of Q&A. So we will come back to some of these. Some of these are really good. You folks have been asking in here. Been trying to make a note. I need better copying and pasting on the YouTube side. Let's see how you did with this one. This question asks, a cloud-based application instance automatically increases resources during busy times and decreases during slower times. Which of the following would best describe this feature? Is it caching, load balancing, rapid elasticity, PAAS, or private cloud? Let's see how you answered this one. We have 55% of you say rapid elasticity, 36% of you say load balancing, 5% said caching, 4% said PAAS, 0% say private cloud. So nobody seemed to pick on the private cloud as being something we need to look at. The idea of a cloud-based system automatically figuring out that you need to have more capacity is fantastic. You can go to sleep. If suddenly your system needs more capacity, the cloud automatically builds out the capacity behind the scenes. And then as things get quieter, it simply shrinks back down again to the regular size. That capability is called rapid elasticity. It's very elastic so that it can automatically expand itself and get bigger, automatically decrease in size and get smaller, just like a piece of elastic. Rapid elasticity is also seamless, so when that happens, nobody knows that that happened. So a great way to be able to figure that out. Rapid elasticity fantastic functionality. There are some challenges with managing it in the cloud, but when it's managed properly, it can automatically adjust your systems and resources to provide services when things get busy or things don't get busy. So you have a few options there to be able to work through those. We've got another option on here. 35% of you chose load balancing. Load balancing, great to be able to take a load and distribute it over a number of systems. But load balancing by itself does not automatically increase the number of resources. It can only balance the load across the resources that are currently connected to the load balancer. So if you overload the systems on the load balancer, you're still overloaded. There's nothing you can do. With rapid elasticity, you can suddenly, things will automatically expand out behind the scenes. So imagine suddenly there's another load balancer that pops up with a bunch of servers connected to it because things got very busy. That's rapid elasticity. Load balancing by itself will distribute a load against a very static number of resources. That's it. Not going to be doing much more from there either. So the other options on here, hardly anybody chose. PaaS, Platform as a Service, is a type of cloud structure where you have to sort of program or build your own infrastructure based on a set of pre-existing modules on a platform. So that's one that at least will get you there. We've also got caching, which is great for a temporary storage space, but caching is not going to increase the number of resources or decrease number of resources when things get slow. And lastly, private cloud, a type of cloud that describes how you access the resources, does not describe how resources may expand or contract as demand is required. In this case, the only option, the only one that makes any sense, ProfessorMesser.com/QA had 55% of you put rapid elasticity as the answer. That is the right answer for those of you that were choosing those different options. Rapid elasticity, there's a number of different sort of cloud characteristics you need to know about, and rapid elasticity, definitely one of those that you need to know. There's plenty more to learn on that 221001. Those are in the objectives, though. Make sure you have these objectives. They list out every single thing you need to know to pass this exam. Not kidding. It's all in there. They kind of give you the knowledge set that you need to have. People often say, how do I know I'm ready for the exam? Because you've gone through these objectives and you were able to check off everything that's there. So that is where you would find a list of objectives, a list of acronyms is in there. It's a great free resource. You'll find a link to it at professormesser.com/objectives. We do one of these study groups once a month for the 221001. We also do one for the 221002. Come back on the 4th. If you're here live, today's the 2nd. Come back on Thursday. We do another study group like this with questions that come from the 1002, the Core 2 A+ exam. We'd love to have you here for that. We've also got some already scheduled for December. Come back on the 7th and the 9th of December, and we will do the A+. We also have on the 14th and 16th, we do Network Plus and Security Plus in December. If you're ever wondering when the next live event is going to be, I always keep the calendar updated. So you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar. You'll know exactly when the next live event is going to be. Well, although I'm not really asking questions of you anymore, but that doesn't mean we're done. We have an after show where you can ask questions of me. So we'll start that after show in just a moment. I'll remind you that we have our course notes and practice exams. I didn't even show you the course notes. Somebody was asking earlier, can I get a copy of your slides? But you don't need a copy of the slides because I already have everything from the videos in the course notes. And they're already in a PDF, or in the case of physical book, of course, there's a physical book, all full color, high quality, printed version of this, but everything that's in the videos, it's in here. So it's a great resource to have, something you might want to look into. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/1001success. Don't forget about the discounted vouchers. Discounted vouchers are there. ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. No special coupon code needed. No special voucher code needed. Nothing super secret you'll need. Just go to ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. They're already discounted right there on the page. And you get my free exam hacks ebook if you purchase it from the Professor Messer website. And of course, don't forget, we're always doing something interesting. If you got something out of the study group today, I would love it if you hit the thumbs up button on this video. It does mean a lot. It's not an ego thing. It's sort of an ego thing, but it's really so that YouTube can see that you liked this, which is great because now I have a representative at YouTube that I can connect with and talk to. They give me information about things that are happening on YouTube, so I know when things are rolling out. I'm only able to do that because of your support of these videos. So as you go through these videos, you like them, thumbs up really does go a long way. Subscribing to the channel really, really does go a long way. That's why you always hear YouTube content creators always telling you that, because it's so, so important. Another great thing is the daily pop quiz questions. You can find them on Twitter and on Instagram, professormesser.com/Twitter, professormesser.com/Instagram. Just type in professormesser.com/ the place you would hope to find me, /Facebook, /LinkedIn, /Discord. You'll find me on any of these sites. And if I'm not there, tell me you would like me to be there, and I'll make one of those available to you as well. Thanks for being here. We always love doing these study groups. Stick around for the after show. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Well, that's always fun when you lose the video right in the middle of what you're doing. That happens sometimes. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. Doesn't happen very often, thankfully, but does happen from time to time. So that's okay. We can always work around those things. I appreciate everybody hanging out and going through all of those. In the chat room, Owen asked, can we go back and watch some that we missed to get the CEUs? You absolutely can. There's no time frame associated with them. There's no specific period where you can't do that anymore. You could go back as long as you'd like. Now, for the A+, only 4 hours can be used towards a renewal. And quite honestly, most of the folks these days are probably using things like CertMaster CE instead. So most people don't collect CEUs anymore, but if you still do, I'm more than happy to give you one. So another question in the chat room. By the way, this is our after show. In the after show, I like to provide you with some Q&A. Instead of me asking the questions, though, you're going to ask the questions of me. We'll take questions directly from the chat room. You'll find it, and this is the YouTube chat that we are using live during the study group, so I'm watching that go by. You'll see the YouTube chat, of course, is on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube's platform. You can also find the same chat available on my website, professormesser.com/live. So some of the chat questions coming through. If I pass my A+ this month, how long do I have until I need the CEUs? When would I have to recertify? Is it a yearly thing? Is it every 3 years? It is every 3 years. And for A+, I think you need 20 CEUs. You can get 4 by watching my videos. You can't just watch my videos and renew your certification, unfortunately. Wouldn't that be great? CertMaster CE, so much easier. A lot of people prefer using CertMaster CE instead, just because it's so much faster than collecting a bunch of CEUs. In some ways, I think it might even be easier. Costs a little bit more for that, but at least it's something you can do. Your certification, once you pass your exam, your certification is good for 3 years. So you would need to renew sometime during that 3-year period, and that would add on another 3 years when you do that. So that's nice to have. Some people also will do a higher level cert. I have a video, and Lori's watching this. Make sure I put this in the YouTube video description if it's not there already. I have a video on how to renew your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus certification in just a few hours. And it talks about primarily the CertMaster CE, but I also go through every other scenario for renewing and give you the advantages and disadvantages behind doing that. So you've got at least some other options there to pull from and being able to work through it. So that's my recommendation. CertMaster CE is probably where I tell people to start. Collecting CEUs is a perfectly reasonable way to do it as well. Or you just might get a higher level CompTIA cert, which will automatically renew any of the low level certs as well. So plenty of options there for renewing. It's almost too many options, isn't it? It can get confusing. If you're wondering, they lay it out pretty well on the CompTIA website, but it's a lot of reading. So you almost have to become an expert in the renewal process to know which one you would finally decide to renew. So it may take a little bit of extra work, but it may be able to be worth that too. Some ideas on where to practice performance-based questions. Well, there's so many places. Of course, you've got this that we do every month. There's a new performance-based question every month. Also on the Professor Messer website, there is my Take 10 Challenge. Well, in fact, let's click the A+ Take 10 Challenge. Oh, look, we got an ad. Sorry about that, but that's what keeps all this craziness going. I've got, of course, my Take 10 Challenge questions that are here. One thing you may not have noticed, I've added some performance-based questions. So let's do this first one. Performance-based question number 1 is about port numbers. We'll make this full screen so you can see it. This is a drag and drop where you would put in, I'm just going to randomly put these in because I'm not paying attention, but you would put in what you think they are. And I put in this one. You're probably not going to get a question like this on your exam where it asks you for every single one of the port numbers you have to know from the exam objectives. But I wanted to put every single one of them in so that you can kind of get used to it. Then once you're done, you can submit the answers. It'll tell you if you got any of them right or any of them wrong. So if you're struggling through these weird things that you need to know, that would be a good one to work through. Not only do I have that one, I also put in an archive from a previous study group for question number 2, which is motherboard components. So you can drag and drop, where's power? And then you can plug it into where these dots are on the screen where you think power is. If you think that's power, you can drop it right there. How about an expansion slot? Where are my expansion slots? So you can also work through those too. So lots that you can do on Professor Messer website. These are the Take 10 questions. You can find them under the A+ training under A+ Take 10 Challenges. It's a great way to get some of those. That's plenty to work through. Have the port numbers there. I know port numbers, if you've never worked with them before, they are a challenge to be able to memorize. The weird part is once you start working with them in the industry, they just get locked in and you just know them. But when you don't know them, memorization really is your only option. And of course, that's one of the first things on the network section is knowing all those different port numbers. Question in the chat room. My professor has his certs in a lot of different things, has let them expire. Now that he has a job and a reputation in the field, does he need to keep renewing them or not? Well, that's really up to sort of an individual and what they are doing with the certs and what they would like to be able to do with the certs. This also applies to people who are getting their certifications for the first time. And it's the question you have to ask yourself or ask of this particular professor, what do you want to do with that cert? There has to be a reason that you got the certification or the reason that you're working towards the certification. So what's the reason? Are you doing it for a particular purpose? Now, if you've already worked in the industry a while, I worked as a field technician. I worked in a corporate help desk. I worked in corporate workstation support. I worked in a corporate server support and network support. I've worked for manufacturers as a sales engineer and a systems engineer. I've done professional services. There's lots of things, but I'd sort of worked into a cybersecurity role as my last job working for someone else. I worked as a systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks, and working there, my A+ certification didn't help me very much. People who were hiring me, they weren't concerned if I knew A+. They wanted to know if I knew security. They wanted to know. And I'd written a book on Nmap. I had, we talked about a lot of cool stuff during the interview about steganography and being able to scan the network and firewalls. And that was their primary purpose. And I had worked a lot at Network Associates with firewalls, the Gauntlet firewall with PGP. There was a lot of security in my background. And so we had lots of conversations about security. Really didn't have a lot come up on the A+ side. And if I told them, hey, I have an A+ cert, they go, well, that's fine, but we're hiring you for a security job, right? You know that. So I didn't mention anything about an A+ during that interview. We all talked about security. So it's whatever that certification is going to do for you is the reason you would want to maintain it. That's sort of a long story in being able to get from point A to point B. But eventually, I let my A+ certification lapse. I let it expire. I don't have any reason to maintain or keep one. I don't want to take the exams now because taking the exam requires me to sign a non-disclosure agreement. It's the candidate agreement they give you right at the beginning. And I don't want to disclose. I want to tell you everything I know. So that's one of the reasons I don't lock myself into that. So that's one of those, Jim. That's the reason I think about it. So maybe the person you work with, they don't need that A+ anymore. They've moved to a different level in their career. They're now working on their CISSP. They're now working on their AWS Cloud Cert. They're now working on a Cisco Cert. There may be other things they're working on. They're a little farther along. John, the chat room, $5 super chat. Not even a comment, just a $5. Thank you so much for the super chat. We really appreciate that. Thank you. Every little bit keeps things going. It kind of fits with the question that came up earlier that John asked about accepting gifts. I turn on super chat so that because people do like to donate, and I appreciate that. And of course, it's very encouraging and kind of motivating for us to know that other people appreciate the things that we're doing. I prefer giving you a product for what you're doing, though. That's why on my website, you see my course notes, you see my practice exams, so that it's kind of a one-to-one. We've turned into kind of a publishing company in that regard, that here's some things that can help you pass your exam that go a little bit beyond the scope of the videos. The videos will always be free, though. That's sort of a key to what we're doing. But I realize some people, they don't need course notes. They don't want those other things, but they'd like to donate. And that's what the super chat is there for. So absolutely. That's one of the things that you can do. But you don't have to. It's completely up to you. But we do appreciate it when folks like Lightning Malloy for the $5 super chat donation. Thank you. Lightning writes, thank you for helping me pass my A+. Got a 708 on my Core 2. Very nice. Congratulations. Now you have your A+ certification, which of course is going to be the most important part of this. Passing both of those is such a big, important thing, and incredibly important to have that certification in your pocket. So it's got to feel good. Lightning. To have that. Congratulations on your A+. I'm glad we were at least able to help in a little bit. As I always say, you did the hard part. You went to the exam center, you took the exam, you passed the exam. That really was the most difficult part of this. So congratulations, and thank you for the super chat. Grafty in the chat room has question about scoring for the exam. A 675 needed for the 1001 on a scale from 100 to 900. Does that essentially equate to an 84%? Well, not really, because between 100 and 900, you get a 675. So you're getting 575 points out of 800, right? So it's a 72%? Or is it? We don't know. And in reality, the exam questions, each question is worth a different number of points. So it's not even a percentage. You can't even calculate a percentage from that. But if you wanted to give you a basic overall, I guess an average, it's probably a 72%. I'm thinking, but we don't know. Is the 675 after the 100 has been taken into account? Is it really 575 points out of 800, or is it 675 points out of 800? We don't know. So it's one of those challenges with this, is that if you try to overthink the grading process, you've sort of lost the lead. You've sort of lost the story. And the story is, don't worry about those particular grades, those numbers, because you have no control over them. Worry about learning what's on the exam, focusing on that. And then whatever else happens, because you don't know. You don't know how they're going to grade it. You don't know which questions are worth more than another. Are the performance-based questions worth more than the multiple choice? We don't know. They might be worth less than some of the multiple choice. So, or is it the case that if you get one performance-based question right, is it 2 multiple choice? Or is it the reverse of that? We don't know. CompTIA doesn't explain. They don't tell us, and they're not going to. So I can't tell people that. We've had people talk and call into the study groups before that said, I got all my multiple choice right. I ran out of time and couldn't even touch my performance-based questions, so I know I got every single one of them wrong. I still passed. So it still can be done. I don't recommend doing it that way, but you could do that. So that's it. In the chat room, some folks even said, I heard some questions actually worth 0 points. It's not that you heard it. CompTIA tells you this on the exam. They tell you we could ask questions on the exam that aren't counted as part of the grade. They've tended to do fewer of those these days, thankfully. But I still hear of situations where I think they might be doing some of those, and they certainly leave the door open for that. I always found that to be off-putting. I found it to be a distraction because suddenly you're asked a question about something you did not study for. I'm like, wait a second, I don't understand why I'm getting a question about this. That doesn't even make sense to me. Well, that's why, because they'll throw those in from time to time. But I have noticed most recently that it has gotten a lot fewer instances of that. So maybe they've decided they didn't want to do so much of that either, which is good. Mateo in the chat room with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much for that donation. We appreciate it. And not even a question, not even a comment, just wanted to do a $5 super chat. We appreciate your support of what we do here. Thanks so much. Another question in the chat room. Will I ever do a Cisco CCNA 200-301 video? I'd love to do a Cisco course. It's sort of in my wheelhouse. I come from the network management, network administration, router, wide area network world. So switching and routing, it's in my blood. So it would be great to do a course like that. It's on my list. I have a big list. Those of you that watch the study groups before, you know that I keep track of what do I want to do next. Now, we know I'm working on Network Plus right now. We're sort of finishing that course up. It's almost done. But we've got A+ to do. A+ exam is going to be updated here sometime the beginning of the year. So I know I'll be doing that next year. So what happens after that? I don't know. Well, I have a list. That's what happens after that. So my list, it changes all the time. It changes every day. It changes based on what you tell me. It changes on what's happening in the industry. It changes based on timing for certain exams. Take, for example, the current Cisco exam. I think it came out just over a year ago. So do I want to start working on the Cisco exam now? Or should I wait until they do a refresh? So I don't know. That's one of those challenges, is that there will be ongoing differences. Can I do, maybe I do Amazon. Maybe I do a Red Hat. Maybe I do Linux Plus. Maybe I do something else. So that's it. Yeah, the current A+ exam probably still going to be here about this time next year. So this is not a case where you have to worry about the exams going away. They're not going away. You can keep working on the exam you're working on. At a minimum, it's still going to be here by July. I suspect it might even be a few months after that. So this time next year, we're probably going to be still talking about the 1001 and 1002. Not even an issue. So don't let it be a concern for you. And in fact, in the chat room, Rokier with the $5 super chat saying, just started studying for the Core 1001, praying I can get it done before it expires. Thanks for all you do. You don't have to worry about a retirement date for the 1001. You're good. At a minimum, it's July. I'm betting. If I was a betting person, and I'm not, but if I was to bet on this, I would say it probably still going to be here about this time next year. So I bet end of October is where I've sort of put a pin in the calendar to think, man, they might extend it all the way out to here. They might extend it out to the end of next year. They did 9 months with Security Plus. They do 9 months with Network Plus. I think they did. So they might do 9 months with A+ too. We just don't know. CompTIA has not announced anything. Everything I'm saying here is pure speculation. I don't have any insight, any special access or insight into these things. They've not mentioned it to me. They don't call me. They never call. But no, they've not mentioned anything about it. I do have like these monthly meetings I can listen in on for their partners. But they've not mentioned anything. All they know is that it's in the beginning, probably Q1, late Q1, Q2 of next year. Maybe we'll see a new exam, but that means that the existing exam's not going away for a very, very, very long time, which is great. If you're studying now, you're in great shape. I'll let you know if you should be jumping over to a new exam. Now is not that time. We're way ahead of the curve at this point. Do not even have a problem with it. Don't worry about it. You're good for that. Other questions in the chat room. Are there topics from the 1001 that show up in the 1002? Generally speaking, no. There is not a lot of overlap between those two exams. If you go back to the 800 series of exams, so we're going back about 6 or 7 years now, the exams were structured very differently. For example, the one exam, you would learn about hardware, and then on the other exam would be the troubleshooting of the hardware. So effectively, you had this Venn diagram of these two circles, and they were almost overlapping each other in many ways. Maybe networking was on the outside of one and security was on the outside of the other, but there was a lot of overlap between those two, and you ended up having to study so much content. Well, since then, CompTIA has done a very good job at separating these things out. You'll notice in the exam objectives, you learn about hardware in domain 3. You learn about troubleshooting the hardware in domain 5 of the same exam. And then when you get to the 1002, none of that hardware stuff's on there. They do a very good job now at making them standalone exams. So you can, and what I recommend for those of you getting into this, I've had people talk to me and say, I had to study so hard and so long so that I could walk in and take both of these exams on the same day. I said, why did you take both exams on the same day? That sounds soul crushing. That sounds like an enormous undertaking. And they said, oh, I thought you had to do it that way. Well, you don't. In fact, I highly recommend you study the content from the Core 1 exam. You study those exam objectives. You learn everything you need to know for the Core 1. You get those objectives solid in your mind. You go take the Core 1 exam. You pass the Core 1 exam. Then you can forget about it and concentrate on the Core 2, which is a completely different set of objectives. So Core 2 is another one of those that you want to focus on. Core 2, maybe you take that one months later. You just have to make sure you take both of them before the entire exam series is retired. So that's why I tell people don't take them both at the same time. That's a lot of work. So absolutely keep working towards that, but do them one at a time. It makes more sense. So a question from Adam, if you pass the Core 1 and Core 2 before these exams retire, let's say the exams retire in July. I think they're going to push it further than that, but let's say they do. Let's say you pass both exams, you get the second exam passed in the middle of July. Well, does that mean my exam's only good for 2 weeks? My certification's only good for 2 weeks? No, your certification's good for 3 years. Whenever you pass the exam, your certification is good for 3 years. What CompTIA is changing, they aren't changing the certification in June. They're changing the set of exam questions in June. So as soon as you pass your exam, you're now certified. It doesn't matter what they do, the exam questions at that point. They change them every day. Doesn't matter. You've already got your certification in your pocket. So that is, you don't have to worry about it. In fact, I will tell you now, this happens every single time there's a retirement. People will be taking their certification exams up until the final day. They will be, because we're humans. That's the way we do it. We push till the very last minute. And we take it people will become certified on the final day that exam is offered. And when they pass it, they're certified for 3 years. So that's one where it does help if you do before then. Can you imagine doing all that work and then getting to the last day and then you don't pass? I can't imagine the pressure on these folks when they go into the exam room. I couldn't handle it. So don't do it that way. Maybe give yourself a little bit more time before that and you'll be good. So an important consideration, if you pass your Network Plus certification, does it renew your A Plus certification? It certainly could. As long as your A Plus is still valid, it will renew. Earning a higher level CompTIA exam renews all the lower level CompTIA exams. So if you get your Network Plus, it will renew the A Plus. And there's a chart on the CompTIA website. For instance, if you get the CompTIA Security Plus, it will renew Network Plus and A Plus. If you get the CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner, it renews CISA Plus, Pen Test, Security, Network Plus, and A Plus. Well, it does everything, almost. Doesn't do Linux, does it? Doesn't do cloud. So there's a different combination depending on what you're choosing here to take and what to renew. It's all on the CompTIA website, earning a higher level CompTIA certification. They have all of that there. That's one I think that can really be useful, is that chart, so you know what you can take to renew some of the older certs. Now, the older cert it's renewing has to be valid. So let's say you took an A+ certification exam 6 years ago and passed, and then 3 years went by and your certification expired, hit the expiration date after 3 years. You didn't renew it. It's not there. So now you take the Network Plus, thinking it's now going to renew the A+, except you don't have the A+. It's expired. So it's not going to renew anything. So make sure that if you're thinking of renewing, that the certification you're renewing is current and valid, and you'll be fine. That's when you do have to plan. You have to plan this out and go there. Is there any reason to skip Core 2 and go straight to Network Plus or Linux Plus? I guess we're assuming, Alex, that you already have Core 1. There is a reason you would not want to skip Core 2, because if you've already taken the Core 1 exam and you pass the Core 1 exam, you're still not A+ certified. You don't have any certification. So you want to maybe get that Core 2 so that you can be A+ certified. The real question, though, is what certification do you need? Now, it sounds like you're trying to decide on A+, Network Plus, or Linux Plus. Those are three very different certs. So the question I always ask people is, what are you planning to do with this? Is this to get a job or a better job? Are there job postings in your area? Do those job postings ask specifically for an A+, Network Plus, or a Linux Plus? What are they asking for? And if it's a job you're working towards and it all says you must have a Linux Plus for this job, well, then you need the Linux Plus. That would be a good reason to skip Core 2 and go straight to Linux Plus. Or you may find that all the jobs you're looking at want an A+. So maybe that's the one you go after. You should always have a reason you're doing these certs. I know it's not always the case, I found. Some people will do certifications because they hear in the industry you need certifications. Well, you do, but there are many certifications to choose from. There's well over 100 certifications you could choose just for Microsoft. So if that's the case, then which one do you choose? Different employers would like you to have a different skill set. So you need to find out where you want to work, or in the type of job where you want to work, what are people asking for? Are they asking for Network Plus every time? Are they asking for A+? What are they asking for? That's to go through. So here's a challenge from Uncle in the chat room. We're all chatting about this in the chat room right now. You have an old Acer Aspire PC. Good times. Had a bad BIOS update. Ouch. I don't know what you mean by bad BIOS update first. You might want to clarify what that means. But now you say it just beeps on boot and does not give a display. All right, well, there's two things there. The first one is understanding where we are. First, what do you mean by a bad BIOS update? Was there a message on the screen? Did it just hang? What happened? Did somebody reboot it in the middle? Did somebody kick the power out in the middle of the BIOS update? That's sad if that happened. The second thing is, before you do any of the things people are telling you to do, people are saying, reset the RAM, do this, try doing this thing, try resetting this. Wait a second. If we've learned anything in A+, it's before you make a change, gather information. So you mentioned it beeps on boot. Well, how does it beep on boot? It sounds like the post is giving you some information. Does it beep one time? Is it one long beep and a short beep? Is it 3 short beeps? What is it? We want to know. And then you need to go to the manual for the Acer Aspire PC and look at the documentation that says, for the beep that you're getting, what does that beep mean? The beep might mean BIOS is corrupted. The beep might mean the memory has a problem. The beep might mean the video has gone out. We don't know. So all this thought that we're putting behind, oh, it was a bad BIOS update, now it's beeping. Well, but is that just coincidental that you updated the BIOS? Could it be that it could be something else? It could be. So we don't know yet. Before you make any changes, before you replace any memory, before you break the machine open, start going through things, before you start moving stuff around, figure out what you got. Figure out what it's telling you. There's a story it's trying to tell you. So collect the data first. So find out, what is it beeping? How did this happen? Maybe interview the people that did the BIOS update. Oh, you're saying it was a bad BIOS update. What did it say? Well, at the end of it, it said, click a button to reboot. That may not be bad. That might be normal. Or did it say, this BIOS is corrupted, your system is fried? Or did they kick the power out in the middle? We don't know. We don't know the situation. So we need that knowledge. That would be helpful. And then knowing what the beeping is telling us is probably the most critical piece of this, because it may be hard to figure out what happened during the BIOS. I don't know. I just clicked a button and that doesn't work. All right, well, that doesn't help me. So let's just deal with what we do know. There's a beep. Let's figure out what the beep code means, and then we can go from there. Some motherboards, very few, but some motherboards have multiple BIOS options on them where you can switch between one BIOS and the other. Some motherboards allow you to do a BIOS update from a USB key so that you can, if you do run into a situation where the BIOS has been corrupted, they still have a way that you could reflash the BIOS. So there's different options. So the system's not fried yet. I know people are telling you, that's it, throw it out, it's no good. But it's not necessarily the case. This is one where updating the BIOS is it's a critical piece. You don't want to just update the BIOS because there's a new one. You rarely want to touch the BIOS sort of for this reason. There's so many things that can go wrong. Well, we got a little bit more information from Uncle, who says, I downloaded the BIOS update from the Acer website. I ran the update program to update the BIOS. Then on reboot, I went into the BIOS menu and reset the settings to default. Why? Then on reboot, it just does one beep. Well, you may be able to get back in there. So it doesn't sound like, if you were able to get into the BIOS settings after it had been updated, your BIOS is probably okay. There may be a way on the motherboard to reset the BIOS configuration, and maybe just a jumper that you restart. All of this should be in your manual. So there may be a way to get it back to factory defaults so that you can then not touch it anymore, or just set minor things in there. I will ask, since this is in my video, when you changed BIOS settings, did you happen to take a picture of the screen before you made the change? Crossing my fingers for you. So that way, if you did happen to get access to the BIOS again, you would know what the original settings were. Always a good idea. You know, the problem with the BIOS is once you're in the BIOS, it's hard to print it out or get a copy or save a copy of it. I always tell people in the video, you've got a camera sitting next to you. Why not just use your camera and take a picture of the BIOS settings before you make a change? And then you know. But usually there's a process. It's a jumper or a battery, usually not a battery anymore. Battery removal usually doesn't do anything for you these days, but a jumper setting where you would add a jumper, restart the system, and it would clear out the BIOS is very common. But you'd have to find out for your specific motherboard if that happens to be the case. So on reboot, it does one beep. Also check your manual and see what one beep means. And we'll have to find that out as well. So that's a challenge. You may be able to still recover the system. It sounds like your BIOS update went fine. So we need to find out what do we do there? How do we get past this point now and getting through it? Another question in the chat room, since Thomas has asked about 7 times, I'll be glad to answer. I'm currently taking Google Coursera for IT support course. What are my thoughts about the program? I know nothing about the program. I literally know zero about that program. Not zero. I saw the cover page that describes Google's IT support certification program. And I know they use Coursera to take you through the process of that, but really know nothing about it. Did not really get into it. I quite honestly, barely have enough time to create the content that I create. And I have so little cycles left over to see what other people are doing. I have sort of a broad understanding of the topics on that cert, but nothing beyond that, unfortunately. And I'm really curious to know what other employers are looking for in these certifications. I haven't seen a lot of people ask for the Google IT certifications other than Google. Google asks for them, not too shocking, but I don't see a lot of other employers asking for it, at least not yet. That doesn't mean that it's not a good certification. It probably is. But the objective we have when we get a cert, for most of us, is that we're trying to use this in our career. We want this to get us a job or get us a better job, get us a better position, more money, different responsibilities, whatever it happens to be. So I always tell people, try to kind of focus on that piece. Try to see what that might be. I think that might help you as well. Whenever I start at least breaking through all the different things that you could choose for certification, you have tons of options available. Employers don't know all of these options. They usually have a handful of certifications they're looking for. So my question to people, if you're in that situation, is to find out what they're asking for. Sometimes employers don't put on there, and you may even want to send them a note back saying, I saw your job posting. You didn't make any mention of any certifications. Are there some that you might be interested in having, or some that you would hope I would have that I could bring to the table? And they might give you more context, because sometimes there's a loss of in communication between the person who needs to hire the person, the hiring manager, and the person who posts the job. Sometimes HR does that. Sometimes there's a disconnect there, and not everything gets onto the job posting that really needs to be there. So if you can somehow get back to the hiring manager and ask them directly, which is so easy these days on things like LinkedIn, you can just ask someone directly, hey, I saw the job out there. Is that your posting? I didn't see a mention of certs. In the best possible world, what type of certifications would you like to see? Start a conversation. In fact, it might even be worth just asking that just to get the conversation going. And then they can answer and say, great, I'll send you my resume. You want me to send it to you on LinkedIn, or should I send it through the HR portal? Be looking for my name. I'd love to talk to you about the job. That's it. So there you go. That kind of covers the bases of knowing what to focus on. I really like the idea of touching base over LinkedIn, of posting things on LinkedIn, of creating blog entries on LinkedIn of things you've done in your home lab. I love the idea of letting other people have a peek into your professional knowledge. And LinkedIn, for better or for worse, it is not the perfect platform, but today it's the one we primarily use for that type of thing, of getting a professional view of what people are doing. And I think if you're looking for a job right now and you've got a home lab, why are you not putting things from your home lab on LinkedIn? There's no reason you shouldn't be doing that right now. There are people on LinkedIn who've said, I got a job because I posted things on LinkedIn. I wasn't even looking for another job. I wasn't even putting my resume in for another job, but they saw all these things I was doing in my home lab and said, we need somebody with those skills. See if they're available. You know, we're in the same city. See if they'd like to come work for us. And they did. I think that's pretty strong. So feel free to have a look at what those options are too. I think that would be pretty good. Let me look at some other questions. And I'm with Grody in the chat room. Grody, you have the best name, Grody. Grody Fiat says, let's not do BIOS updates unless they're absolutely necessary, shall we? I agree. And it's not only because of what we're seeing here, but it's happened to us too. It's happened to Grody, I guarantee. It's happened to me, where we've done a BIOS upgrade or a firmware upgrade of a device. And during that upgrade process, you'll never come out of that process with a machine that's shinier, newer, or better. You come out with a machine that's exactly the same. That's your best case. Your worst case is that you now have an anchor. Your worst case is that you've now ruined this device. That's the worst case. And I've screwed up some devices before in my career by not paying attention during the upgrade process and literally doing dumb things like moving it out of the way and the power pops out of the back. Like, what was I thinking? And that's what people told me. Like, what were you thinking? Like, I wasn't. I just thought I'd move it out of the way. Like, yeah, but it was doing a firmware upgrade. When it does a firmware upgrade, you should think of this as a crime scene. You should put yellow tape around it at like a 10-foot diameter. There should be people stopping other people from getting near it. Sorry, ma'am. You can't walk in there. We're doing a firmware upgrade. There should be, you should treat it like nobody touch that. Don't get near it. Don't do it. Yeah, and I know Dell comes out with BIOS upgrades like it's going out of style. You should ignore every single one of them. You should. Never do a BIOS upgrade unless there's something specific in that BIOS upgrade that will fix a problem you're having. I bet you most of the time that's not the case. I bet you 99.999% of the time that's not the case. Now, I used to be the person, the update came out. Oh, I need that update. I need it right now. I need the most recent on my machine right now. And I would rush to get the update on there. But then you run into problems. You run into these issues where the update creates a problem. And then you learn pretty quick, maybe having a little bit of an older machine isn't so bad. Maybe running a couple revs behind isn't, because it's running fine for me now. Why would I want to do that? Well, for example, they just introduced a new version of Mac OS. I'm running Mac OS on my desktop. That's what we usually run here. Now in this room, I have Mac OS. I have another Mac OS. In fact, the Mac OS here is running the new version because it's on my laptop that rarely does anything horrible. And then in front of me, the Mac OS did not change. So still running Big Sur, which is the previous version is what's running everything that you saw today from the Q&A, everything that's on my screen, that's still running the old version of Mac OS because I knew I've got a study group today and the study group could all get canceled if I mess up this machine. Do I have backups? Absolutely. Do I want to go through the process of recovery? I do not. So it's one thing to back up. It's another thing to recover. So that's one of those situations where you don't want to be in that situation to do that. So on one of these, let's kind of scoot this around. So that's not what I wanted. I wanted this right here. So on one of my machines, I have, this is the one that you see that's in front of me is the current version. In fact, look at the old machine, an iMac Pro from 2017. It just runs like a champ, by the way, with its 128 gig of 2,666 megahertz DDR4. And when I do a 4K video, when I try to get that going, you know it. But this is my laptop in front of me running Monterey. Again, a 2017 device. That's why that new laptop is going to show up this month. But you can see I'm running two different operating systems on here just so I can have some different options. So I was happy to upgrade the laptop. Oh, but we're not going to upgrade the system in front of me. You should feel the same way about your BIOS. Don't upgrade that BIOS unless you're really, really sure that you want to be doing them. There's got to be a good reason, right, to be able to have that there. And good point, Tom, in the chat room. If you're upgrading the BIOS or the firmware or whatever it is, always have a UPS. Always plug it into battery backup. If possible, one that is an always-on sine wave UPS, not one that's a standby UPS. Standby UPSs run from power, And when it loses the power, you hear the relay click, and it clicks you over to the battery backup. Well, the process between moving between the wall power and the battery is nanoseconds, microseconds, nanoseconds. It's very short. It's a short period of time. But sometimes it's just long enough that your system still powers off, or it creates a problem, hangs your system. So I don't even trust those so much. I trust the always on, sine wave, linear UPS type systems to be able to have that. So it's up to you though, be able to have that. Folks in the chat room, most people in the IT field don't like Macs. I think there's a difference between liking them and using them though. I came from cybersecurity as my last position, where in this company, half of the people in the company ran Mac OS, because a lot of us were in the field, we're running security technologies. Mac OS was the right solution for what we were doing. But folks that were inside, maybe some of the development team, some of the marketing team, other folks would also use Windows. So we were an organization that was almost 50% Mac OS, 50% Windows. So our IT team, they were pretty spot on. They knew Mac OS and they knew Windows. They were a good place to go for anything. They covered the bases to get those running, and they were critical for us in the field. The Mac OS was just something we just had to have in the field. Pretty important. Their challenge, I think, is that's a lot to know. And then on top of that, they probably need to know the Linux side, because our servers in the data center are all Linux servers. So you end up, whether you want to or not in this industry, you end up learning multiple operating systems and use them in multiple ways. In fact, the more you know about those different technologies, the better you're going to be in IT. It's interesting how they're all more similar than they are different, but there are significant differences there that you need to know about. So in the chat room, the question about how important will it be to learn your way around a Mac in the IT industry, I guarantee you in your organization, there are people with Mac OS that are running Mac OS. So I'm going to give Grody the gold star for reading my mind, because I think this is an opportunity for you. Because Grody says, we hate having to deal with the Macs, with the very few Macs in our network. And Macs don't always play well in a Windows domain. Well, nothing plays well in a Windows domain than Windows. So you can't blame that on the Mac. But the real key here, and what I'm seeing with what you have in your environment, I'm going to guess, when you say very few Macs, there's a marketing team or a graphics group, and all they do is they use Mac OS, because for them, that's the right platform. So when you're working with those Macs, there's so few of them that there's been no resources really put into the training and use of Mac OS in your environment. So anytime something goes wrong with it, immediately there's fear, because that's how, as humans, that's how we react to things we don't know, is we're scared of them. That's how I react. When I run into a new technology I've never used before, I think, oh man, I don't know about this. I am uncomfortable having to work on this. I need to go learn more about this. Then I go back, I read the manuals, I watch some YouTube videos, I get familiarity with it. I go in, I work on the system, and I think, well, that wasn't so hard. I made it into a much bigger thing than it really was. Much bigger. Almost every time I make it into a much bigger thing than it really is. Because once you learn about it, then you got it. So if you want to be the one in your organization, this kind of fits well with the question we had, how important it is to learn your way around a Mac in the IT industry. If there's something in your environment that people don't like to touch, they get nervous about being around it, you don't really have a good group of folks in your organization that are knowledgeable with that particular technology, my recommendation to you is to jump in and learn everything you can about that. Become the expert in that technology. so that you become the one people can go to. Suddenly now you're more valuable in the organization because you're the Mac guy. You're the Mac person. You know Mac's crazy. So absolutely get your own Mac OS system. Learn it. Have it as your second laptop. Have it as your primary system so that you can understand the nuances of the operating system. Every operating system has its own set of quirks, personality settings, differentials. There's all kinds of weird things inside of it that you'll run into. So, and you'll find new things about the operating system all the time. But at the end of the day, it's just an OS. It's just an OS with a remarkably elegant user interface. That is by far better than anything else in the industry. Until you use Windows. Windows, of course, is a very elegant OS. It's better than anything else in the industry. Unless you're using Linux, of course, which has a very elegant OS, is better than anything else in the industry. It's one of those things where every single one of those is a perfectly valid argument. And we could all sit around and argue about which one's better or which one's worse. But the reality is we're all using them. And every organization's got them. I guarantee you, if you're in a decently sized company, you're working with Windows, there's got to be somebody with Mac. I guarantee you. That one group. And then you've got Linux in your data center for sure. So the more you can do with understanding how to manage those systems. You mentioned not being able to remote into the Windows systems. All right, why not just turn on the VNC capabilities and use VNC to connect to the Mac? You know, those types of things are useful. Like it's built into the operating system. You can literally go in. I'm going to bring up mine so you can kind of see what's here. And let's say you want to, under the sharing, it's in my system preferences under sharing. So you have to know where all these things are. And if you go into the sharing part, let me click it. You got a lot of options in here for sharing. So under mine, everything's turned off. But under sharing, here we go. I don't think I'm got anything on here that's outside the scope of what you need to know. There, I can turn on and off file sharing, media sharing, printer sharing, remote login, remote management, remote Apple events, internet sharing, Bluetooth sharing, content caching, and at the top, screen sharing. So under screen sharing, I can set up what people are able to access, how they're able to access. This is my computer. Odyssey is this computer name. So you've got the settings you can turn on, what users should be able to share the screen, and then you can just use VNC to connect to this device. It's built into the OS. So does it add some additional challenges? It's different than Windows, but it gives you other options to work through. So my recommendation, whether it's an operating system, an application, a server, if there's something else that is people don't want to touch, my recommendation to you is always go find out how you can touch it. You need to become the expert in that. Wouldn't VNC be disabled in an enterprise environment? Well, maybe, but you could turn it on. Screen sharing is something you can manage. So if you are using it, if you're not currently using it, turn it on, then you can use it. Why would it be disabled? If you need it, then it would not be disabled. That's sort of the idea. Now, we had to disable VNC because it wasn't secure. Well, then no screen sharing is secure. I guess that's true, but you can't say it's not secure because in Mac OS, literally allow access for the security is built into it. So this is another one of those cases, though, that not being able to properly manage systems and making excuses for that isn't necessarily always the best way to go about it. But there are options to be able to securely send VNC traffic across the network. Maybe those options require you to set up a VPN. Maybe you use a secure version of VNC. You know, figure out the thing that works for you so that it fits into your requirements at your organization. Simply saying, we're not going to do it because it's not secure. Well, then you make it secure for that reason. There are plenty of ways to do it. Now, by default, is it? No, it's not going to by default. It's the same reason you don't use Telnet. Of course you wouldn't use Telnet. Well, we can't remote into that device because Telnet's not secure. Sorry. Well, why don't you just use SSH? Why don't you just use the secure version of VNC? So that's why I always say there's a reason for having those policies, and they're important policies to follow, but you just find the system and the configuration that would make it secure. So that's what you would do, is to focus on that effort. Just because it's a different operating system doesn't mean this. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to support it. You should absolutely be able to support it. And you can fine tune it and you can make it secure. So go make it secure. I think a lot of people, and again, I see this a lot with security. Well, we don't know how that works. We're not going to allow it. We're scared of it. We're not going to allow it. All right. What if I was able to show you that it was secure? Would that be helpful? Yeah. Okay. We can do that. That works. That works from there. To be able to do that. That kind of gives an approach to sort of my standard perspective on this. If you ever find anything in your environment, Mac OS, piece of middleware, some cloud technology, a server, and people don't want to touch it, you need to be the one that touches it. You will be remarkable. It will be remarkable to you how your street cred increases, how you have a more value you bring to the organization when you're the person jumping in and learning these technologies. Also, what I found is the more you do that, the more comfortable you get in learning the new technologies. So those are all very good skills to have, and they will help you throughout all of this. Well, we've come to the end of another hour. Can you believe it? Another study group is in the can. We've got another study group, though, on Thursday. That's 2 days from now. We'd love to have you come back. I've got brand new questions every month. We've got, of course, another after show where you can ask any question you would like. If you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be, you might be watching this on a replay months later. You can always go to my calendar, go to professormesser.com/calendar. You'll know exactly when the next live event is going to be, and we'd love to have you there as well. Thanks for joining us on the study group. We love doing these. We love that you are in the chat room. We love the Q&A we get to have during the first hour, and we love the Q&A during the second hour as well. I thank you for being here. Hopefully we can see you also 2 days later on Thursday. Come on back for the Core 2. But thanks for joining us this time. We will see you next time on the Core 1 A+ study group. Thanks, everyone.